But just thank you for like agreeing to this interview.
No, I'm
And
delighted.
I think I came across your stuff when you were doing some free online workshops, obviously during lockdown, and you were giving some information. And you know, there's a lot of stuff out there, isn't there? There's I mean, people have just gone online crazy with workshops and courses. But the reason I enjoyed your stuff so much was really because it felt very sincere and authentic, and it felt like you weren't just repeating something that, you know, someone else had said. It was like you lived and breathed it, and you were given you know, really good presentation, but you were also sharing some real life stories, which I think is so important when we're teaching this kind of stuff, so people, you know, if people can feel it. And I don't know, you know, at Connected Kids, we're very much about a connection from the heart, and about feeling when things are authentic and sincere, rather than just said, you know, theoretically and wrote. So I'm really delighted. So reading a little bit about your background, you can fill in the blanks as well. The stuff that you do is based around your experience as a foster carer initially, and that was for, I think you said 7 years. Is that right? You said you were a foster carer, and I know how challenging as a foster mum as well, myself, to a now 13-year-old boy. We've had various kids stay with us before that. I know how challenging that can be. So you know, it was really interesting to listen to you talk about the training that you did as well, specifically to cope, I think, as a foster carer, and I'd like you to maybe share a wee bit about that. But some of the things you were mentioning is very similar to kind of what we do in Connected Kids as well, that need for presence, awareness, you know, we call it being grounded. But yeah, so you did do some specific training, seemed to help with your fostering.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd done loads of training as a carer. You'll know they give you so much training, but none of it really, I mean, I would go home and I would forget all about it in the moments of those, you know, stress and fear. I didn't understand that this was what was going on in my brain, was I was being triggered into all my own stuff, and I wasn't present in that moment, and I was disconnected from my child. I couldn't see that. I didn't know, nobody told me. And I had to find something for this particular child, because he just was getting worse and worse, and he was going to end up in a care facility at the age of 7, and we just didn't want that for him. And I discovered this. I went along to the Ace Aware seminar in Glasgow, and it was wonderful, blew my mind. And it was about all the kids I had in my home. I'm sure all the people in the audience were the same, but there was no answers as to what to do differently. And all this information they sent us home with, and I was looking over, and I found this one wee line by post at the Post Institute, and I just googled them, and it opened up a whole world to me of knowledge and of how to really see my patterns and see how my behaviours and my reactions were affecting my child. And that changed everything for me.
What was his name, and what was the training that you did?
It's Brian Post at the Post Institute, and he does the stress model.
Right.
And it's his model that I learned and started to put into practice. And actually joined a forum, and I did a whole kind of month-long program where I went through it with him day by day. A whole group of us did it together. It's the first one he did, and it just was so transformative for my child, but for me and for my kids as well. Not just for my foster child. I've got a daughter with AMPDA, so it just changed everything for her. It's changed my relationship with my family, my mum. I had a tricky relationship at times, you know. I can see people differently and where they're coming from now that I can see what's going on for them.
And what was it you said your daughter has a diagnosis of?
She saw pathological demand avoidance.
Ah, right. Okay.
It's on the spectrum.
Yes.
It's not very recognised.
Yes.
But she is a classic. I mean, we struggled all her life. We didn't know what was wrong. We knew she's also profoundly deaf. She wears a cochlear implant. She has got learning difficulties. And my two daughters would, we would kick off and scream and yell, and I joined in with them, screaming and yelling and trying to control them, and with punishments and all of that stuff. For years I struggled. And then we all used to joke and say one day they'll find something that explains all of her stuff, because nobody knew what was going on. And then they started to hear about PDA, and it's as if they wrote it about her. I can't get a diagnosis, but I know I put my life in it. That is
it's harder when you're in that limbo situation as well, isn't it? When you kind of feel and breathe it 24/7, and you feel like you're working with hands tied behind your back. Because you can't.
Because of her hearing impairment, it kind of muddies the waters, and they won't They don't know which it is. They can't say, but I know. I don't need, I've given up. I don't need a diagnosis to know. Mums know these things. I think 99% of the time, nobody wants to give their kids a diagnosis if it's not really what's going on. You know.
Do you want to say a little
bit
about?
It changes everything.
Do you want to say a little bit about the charity that you set up as well? First?
Yeah. So when I learned this technique and I saw the difference it made, and then I just felt, I never felt like this in my life, but I felt so driven and to tell why did I not know this stuff? Why have I brought up my 2 kids and looked after all these kids without this knowledge? And I just want to tell everybody. It's bursting with it, you know. And I became certified in the technique. And I went on to the Bride Post and I learned how to teach it. And I've set up this charity. I just want to get it out to as many people. Yeah. I think if even parents, not necessarily kids with trauma or kids with special needs, it works for everybody. And it keeps that, it's all about that connection and that relationship. And like you say, being grounded and being connected at that and with your kids in those moments.
What's Brian Post's background then, who's obviously developed this?
Yes, because it's why should you listen to him? Yeah, absolutely. But I think what really hit home for me, but like you're saying, he's lived it. He's a child of trauma and adoption himself. Right. And he grew up with a sister in adoption who had a lot of issues. And he then became a social worker. Don't hold that against him. He became a social worker, and he worked with lots of families, and he started doing all sorts of degrees. He wanted to learn more about it, and he now works with all the troubled youths in America that they can't find anywhere to put. No one will take them. He has care facilities for them. He works with them, and he travels the world talking about his stress model that he came up with. Okay. That made all the difference.
And
really knows what he's talking about.
So so he's obviously got lots of real life as well as, you know, professional experience. Yeah. Obviously, I'm not expecting you to run through everything. Just give us a flavour of what trauma-informed parenting is, because you have your own workshops things anyway. But if someone was asking, what is it? What would you say?
Yeah, no. Well, really, it's all about changing. It's about putting on different. They call it the trauma lens. You put on a pair of glasses and see your child very differently. It's about seeing the fear and the stress underneath that's causing the behaviour. When I started to understand that my kid wasn't choosing any of that behaviour, they could not help or control that. It was the stress and the fear that causes all behaviour arises from stress and fear. And seeing that, so when I could see my child misbehave, instead of focusing on the behaviour and just wanting to shut it down, I could see, right, okay, what's going on here? What is causing that behaviour? Because there's something causing it. Like Dr. Ross Green he talks about all kids do well if they can, and if they can't, there's a reason why, and it's up to us as the adults to figure out what that reason is. But really, as well, seeing it was me that had to make the changes. You know, it wasn't. I didn't come home and tell my kids they had to change. It was changing my reaction to them and seeing what was happening for me in that moment. And I didn't realise that I was being triggered constantly by my kids. The minute they would misbehave, I got into my fear and my stress, and I would start to get all try come in with control and consequences. That was just making it worse. I was just adding more stress onto an already stressful situation. So seeing that pattern and being aware of that and starting to be able to calm myself down. And because my brain was offline.
I mean, what's the difference though? Because you said you'd done lots of training before that, and then you did this. What's the difference between the previous training and this?
I think because what would happen was I'd listen to all the training and it was all great, but I went home and then my kids would misbehave and I would get stressed out. And I get into my own stuff and my brain switched off and I don't remember any of the training that I've had. So this training taught me how to stop and breathe, because that's changed everything for me, as you'll know all about breathing. But it helped me to regulate in that moment and turn my brain back on so that I could then make a conscious choice about how I was going to tackle this. Because before I was off on one, my brain was away. You know, it's that runaway train when we get stressed out and our brain starts to overthink what's going to happen in the future. You're not in the moment, like you say, we're not grounded. We're away off on one, thinking about what might happen. How often do we talk about, oh, but that might happen and this might happen, and then he's going to, you know, he's going to kill someone and it'll be my fault. Well, I'll go to jail, and you know that's not happening right now. It's just to learn to stop and breathe and go, right, what's really happening right now today, and deal with that, and then I can be calm. And how doing the more I did that, the better it got, the more it worked.
Yeah. I think just that ability to, you know, for me, because obviously I work from a meditation perspective, but it's like a superpower. You know, it's like once you
I know.
realise that, and it's not the only thing, but it's the starting point, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It's the grounding point.
It's too simple almost though, isn't it? People think, oh, I do that anyway, I breathe, you know. And I think I always used to, because people obviously talked about breathing. And I'm like, yeah. And that app used to come up, used to say, remember to breathe. And I'm like, you know, but I think I thought that it was telling me, because I heard people talk about meditation and things, and they talk about, you know, thinking about how it feels and, you know, being conscious of what your breathing is doing.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was like a distraction. I didn't realize it actually was changing the chemicals in my brain. And once I realized that and I started to do that, it really made a difference, and it's so powerful. I mean, I couldn't be sitting doing this kind of thing or doing workshops, you know, if I hadn't learned how to calm myself down and calm my mind and calm my body.
And there's maybe a bit of once you know, that you're talking about how it starts with you, once we have that understanding of why we respond in certain ways, then there can be compassion as well for ourselves of why we've responded before. And then when we have our superpower or breath or whatever other techniques the trauma-informed parenting brings and meditation, you know, it's then the ability to go, right, this is a fresh start. It's like a reset button, and, you know, can start from there.
So we didn't know. I talk a lot about that. You know, there's no point. I could write a book on the times about if only I'd known this stuff, you know. And I look back, and parents say to me all the time when they start to really get this, and they say, oh, I feel so bad about the kids that we had that had to leave because we didn't know this, you know. But you know, you can only move on now with what you know, and there's nothing wrong with going back to these, you know. I still see a lot of my kids, and there's nothing wrong with saying to them, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what was going on for you, you know. I didn't realize what was going on for me, you know, and still have that relationship.
I think it's one of the things that came from your training when I was listening to about the ability to acknowledge and say sorry when, you know, that's such a powerful thing, because these children in care in particular, it feels like nobody really wants to take the responsibility. You know, they're quite controlled by everything and everyone, and it's hard.
And they're not allowed to express anything negative. They're not allowed to. I certainly didn't let my kids express, you know, they weren't allowed to slam doors and storm about and be cheeky and be rude, and to understand that I did that as an adult when I was annoyed, but I wasn't giving my kids that outlet, and then obviously teaching them more appropriate ways to do that. And they're like, well, let's both scream together. We're both upset. We're both stressed. Let's get this out. And then I'm pushing it down and hoping it goes away, because it's just going to come back up worse. You know, it's going to stay in there and fester. And like the power. The apologies are wonderful, and they're so hard. It is hard at first. Because I hear a lot of parents say, but nobody apologises to me. I think we're really adults here, you know. We forget that in that moment of stress. Actually, it's worked more for me with my normal average teenage daughter. This has really helped me so much with her, because I don't maybe make the allowances for her that I do for my foster kids and for my child with autism. And I'm like, well, come on, go over it. You know, you should be doing this. And I don't maybe see this, that we've all got trauma. She's grown up with an autistic sister. Of course, she's got trauma. And we all yelled and screamed for years. So, you know, I've got to take some responsibility there. But when she's been really horrible and she just won't tell me what's wrong, no matter how many times I ask her, and she drops off to her room, it's really hard for me to work through that and calm myself and see what's going on for me, and then be able to go in and say to her, look, I'm really sorry. What happened there? And really, I'm not saying it's my fault. Taking responsibility doesn't mean it's your fault that you did something wrong. It just means that you can be, you can respond. You've got a different ability to respond differently. So responsibility is being able to take that on and say, look, I can act differently in this moment, and I can change this. I can say, look, I'm sorry. And see, when I come into her and I say to her, and she's raging, she's sitting in her room, hating me, you know, and I come in and I say, I'm really sorry, because by this time I'm actually calm. I'm not pretending to be calm. Done my breathing and over, you know, when I've talked it out with someone, I've got it off my chest and I've worked through it, and I can say, what did I do? What could we have done differently there? I'm really sorry that happened. Instead, and she just melts. The defences come down, and she cries, and she tells me that she's so sorry. No, it's my fault. I should, you know, and then it all comes out, whatever it is.
I was guessing you probably
button heads.
You probably answered this question already, but unless there's something else to add, because I was going to say, what's the difference you know, what does it mean to a young person if their parent or their carer is trauma informed? What difference does it make to their life?
Yeah, oh, it made all the difference to my wee guy, especially with trauma. But the difference is that I know, because I'm now trying to parent my children very differently to how they've been parented most of their life. I learned this technique, is to encouraging them to express, process, understand what's going on for them, and instead of trying to just shut it down. Because I hadn't realised how much when they were having a negative emotion, it might be whining or moaning or complaining or just fed up, especially in this world we're living in right now. And I just hadn't realised how uncomfortable that made me. So I said that whole, oh, don't cry, or you're okay, it'll be fine, forget about it, instead of actually sitting with a minute and saying, yeah, it's rubbish, it's really, really hard for you and that's terrible, and not trying to fix it and letting them feel the way they feel and acknowledging that. Because my daughter loves nothing better as an adult. She's 19 and she loves nothing better now than coming and reminding me of all the times when she had something wrong and I was belittling it. You know, they love to pick that up and bring it back up. And she was right. I didn't realise I was doing it. You know, she'd hurt herself and I'd say, oh, it's fine, away you go. Because I was like, oh, I don't want to deal with that, don't want to see it makes me uncomfortable. Oh, don't cry, you're fine. It's actually allow these kids to express how they feel, and it's okay. Because life is 50% positive and 50% negative. When we like to pretend the negative isn't there, but we have to see it, acknowledge it and feel it to then move on. Because if not, it's just going to keep coming up for us.
It reminds me of, you've probably read Dan Siegel's work, The Whole Brain Child.
It's great,
very similar in that sense of, you know, we're quick to rush to fix things, but we don't acknowledge the impact that it's had, and the brain's trying to process it. So aids the processing by acknowledging this is difficult, this is not.
Well, especially, I mean, even as a parent of a child with special needs, it was nothing nicer than sitting with other parents with special needs kids, talking about our worries and our fears without somebody having to say, oh no, but it'll be okay. Because do you know what, sometimes it might not be okay, and you have to be in that, and having someone meet you in that is so therapeutic. Instead of just, because a lot of my other friends without kids with special needs, they can't help it, but they don't want to hear it. It makes them uncomfortable to hear me talk about my reality. And sometimes I just need somebody to listen to me. But it's hard for people to do that when it's an uncomfortable topic. So it's the same for our kids, to listen and to be there in it with them instead of trying to fix it all the time and shut it up, shut it down. So especially in this world, you know, we spent a lot of time all yelling and screaming together and just getting all our frustration out.
Yeah.
You know, there's a woman on Facebook and she was screaming, everyone needs to release their steam. Everyone needs to scream, and one at a time they all went for it and scream, and your turn to scream. It's so good to get it out. Get it out.
I think the COVID is certainly you know, put a big spotlight on things that people are very uncomfortable with, which could be themselves and their own thoughts.
We've had to, you know, work on our own. It's forced us into that, hasn't it?
It has. And then the other question I had was, you know, as a parent, what difference does it make to be trauma informed? What? You know?
I think the thing is that really surprised me was that when you're a parent and you have kids with issues, with behavioural issues, it's so draining emotionally for the parent. You know, we're constantly being dragged into our own stuff, but we don't realise it. So it's that exhausting, that emotionally exhausted, and I can't do this anymore, and it's too much. But when I learned that I had to stay calm and not be triggered in that moment, or be able to just recognise that I was being triggered, sometimes just being able to go, oh, hang on a minute, that's not really about my child, that's actually my stuff. All right, okay, I'll put that away for now, I can deal with that later, and see what was going on in the moment. I didn't feel that. I didn't get emotionally drained. I was calm, and my breathing obviously was helping me to stay calm as well. So I wasn't in that constant heightened state of emotion myself. When my child was, I was able to stay calm and help them regulate. And it's so powerful when you see the difference in your child and see how simple it is to actually help them and just be calm, because you're calm. I think that as well, learning that my calm state could, just being beside my child and being calm had a knock-on effect, that we actually affect each other as human beings, and you don't have to say anything or do anything. You just have to be calm and feel calm and sit there and share that calm with them, and you'll see your child just calm down.
It sounds like there's a couple of not that I've done your training specifically, but it sounds like there's almost like a reframing, like they do in CBT, where they reframe the situation. So your ability to go, this is my stuff that's been triggered here, right? Let's put that to one side, and I just need to breathe now because it's been triggered.
Yeah.
And that's such an act of self-compassion, isn't it? Because it It means, because one of the things I find, you know, I don't have my own kids, but we have our foster son, and I had various other children stay with us before that. And the thing I find really interesting is the guilt when we get it wrong. You know, the guilt and the punishment, the self-punishment of, oh my goodness, I should be better than this. When actually that's ridiculous. What a ridiculous thought that you can get this right every single time. It's the ability to recognise that, well, you did your best. You can do better, but try for that next time and acknowledge.
Yes, also, like, yeah, but like we were saying, just come back and say sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I get really stressed out there. And it's great for our kids to see us mess up and see how we can apologise, because that's you modelling to them what happens when you mess up, and then they learn to do that too.
I know.
And learn to say it's okay to say I'm sorry.
There was a bit in your course that certainly stayed with me, that that I was sitting with my son, and I don't know, we were having a disagreement about something, and I turned to him and said, you know, I've never had to look after a 13-year-old boy before in my home. This is all new to me, totally new. So meet me halfway. I'm doing my best, okay? And that was such a revelation for me, for me to say that, and for me to actually put into words reality, you know. And it was, you could see him going, oh yeah, right enough, yeah. You know,
he's got goosebumps there. No, but it's just that, and it's connecting and being honest with your kids about how you feel as well.
Yeah.
And if people say to me, but I can't, I mean, I think they think that by apologising, you're showing some kind of weakness and that your child's going to throw that back at you. It's certainly never been my and if they did, I would just say, yeah, you're right, you know, I'm an idiot. And often I would say things like, no, unfortunately you're stuck with me and I can't get it, I'm an idiot. And they go, oh, no, you're not. You know, they hate to see you saying that, but I'm kidding on, obviously, but you're stuck with rotten old me, and they're like, oh no, I love you, or whatever. But yeah, just being real. Kids love it when they apologise to them. You know, I don't know if did you hear me talking about when I was in school? I'm terribly dyslexic, which is quite a challenge when you're running a charity and writing applications for funding, I can tell you. But my teacher used to read my work out as I wrote it, and the kids in class would laugh hysterically. They thought it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard, and I would be sitting crying, tears running down my face, devastated. And she said to me, wait behind a break. And I thought, oh, what now? So all day went, and she said to me, I am so sorry. I thought that if I could make you hate me, you would want to prove to me that you could do it. She understand. They didn't understand dyslexia then. And she said, but I understand now you can't, you know, you're doing, you know, that's the wrong way. It doesn't work with you. And she genuinely was so apologetic to me. And I've never worked for a teacher like I worked for that teacher. I got the best report of my whole year. I was blown away to have an adult come down to me and say, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have done that to you. And I had a great year after that, because that woman connected with me and it made such a difference. Instead of what we seem to think, that we're showing weakness and that'll be a bad thing.
It's funny, you made some reference to, I obviously deal with social workers in my role as a foster carer, and you know, you meet some fantastic ones and you meet some that you think, oh my goodness, you know, won't finish the end of that sentence, but there is it's a difficult, I think it's to do with their training as well, you know, it's to do with that, because that connection you're talking about is so important. And I think sometimes people switch off that connection to survive because they don't know what else to do.
It's a survival instinct. That's what I thought. We're in survival in our brain. We're just in our kids are in survival in these moments as well. But seeing this, using this trauma lens now, I can see all my social workers so differently. I see it's like I go out in the world now and I see everyone differently. And I see there must be stress, they must be scared. The pressure on these people are so intense. Their workload's too much, and they've got so much pressure from higher up, and you know, they're not meeting all that that they need to do, and the stress. And of course, you know that in the media, if something goes wrong, the buck's going to stop with that social worker, and they know that. You know, the social worker should have seen it, they should have known. So the pressure is intense, and they're terrified. So they're not thinking clearly. They're not connecting with people. They're all scared and stressed. Absolutely.
It's tough.
I'm going to say it's a pandemic, but we've already got one. But stress is affecting everyone in the world, and at the moment it's really bad, obviously, because of this. I mean, look on all these forums, and all you see is people arguing and fighting and telling each other how selfish they are for going out to the restaurants, or you know, whatever they've done that they think they shouldn't be. Everyone's trying to control each other and want them to do what they want them to do, and they're all calling each other names, and they're all disconnecting and arguing. It's just stress and fear.
It is.
So we misbehave just the same as our kids misbehave in those moments of stress and fear.
I think definitely the inner child gets triggered and we don't realise that that's what's being triggered. So the ability to go, that's my stuff. Yeah. I'll look at that later.
You're not thinking, you're offline. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I
used to talk about when I would fight with my husband and we would have this arguments and we would argue about what each other had said in the argument while we were still in the argument. And I couldn't even remember what he'd said. I'm trying to remember it. And I'm like, my brain had shut down. I didn't realise that. Now we don't even bother with those conversations because we realise it's nonsense. The whole thing's nonsense. Nobody's making any sense.
I was going to say, what are your top 3 tips for people if they want to even dip their toe into practicing being trauma informed? What would be your...
The first thing is so important is to breathe. Breathing changes everything, because so the minute you can see your child misbehave is to start to do your slow breathing. I talk about doing your breathing before you even are with your child, because if you wait till you're stressed out, you won't do it. So you have to get it into practice. I would do my breathing going to pick the kids up from school. I'd do it again when we got home. Get your kids doing it, because it's going to reduce everybody's stress the minute you start to breathe. Calm breathing. Again, obviously I encourage yoga, meditation and all that stuff, and do your breathing. Sometimes in a moment when your kids kick, just say nothing and do nothing and walk away and just calmly go away and do your breathing before you do anything else. I was always talking and nagging and they weren't hearing me because they were all stressed out and their brains were offline. I just added more stress. So breathe. That's number one, always number one. I'd say the next thing is to see that your child is not choosing these behaviours. They are stressed and they are scared, so see their fear. So first you have to see your own fear, do your breathing, then see their fear. See that behaviour is coming from stress and fear. If you look at a child and you see a naughty, misbehaving child doing something to you or choosing to misbehave, you'll see a very different child to a child that you see as frightened and scared. So if you see if you look at a child differently, you'll see a different child. So see the fear. And then I think as well, it's all about connection and relationship. So if we can stay connected and calm, if we can do our breathing, see our child's fear and come in with it, it's because if you use your connection, your relationship is going to be far more effective than using punishments and consequences. It's to come in and wait till they're calm, both be calm. And that's when you talk about when you're both calm and connected again, is when you talk about, right, what could we have done differently there? You know, what went wrong? What maybe should we not have done? And that's when they learn. Kids don't learn when they're being yelled and screamed at and their brain's shut down and they're sitting on their own in the corner. They learn when you're connected and calm.
That's really useful, really useful advice. It's funny when you were chatting there about kids, they don't choose that behaviour. I've been reading that book, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, and fantastic book, and all about these different case studies. But the thing that really struck me was a child, sometimes you got, even a teenager, if they behave in a way, you got to see it's not the teen that's behaving, it's the 3 or the 4-year-old them that's feeling and a
regressed child. Yeah, stressed child is a regressed child.
Yeah, and it really makes
to that emotional age.
Means that you can have this connection with them that you can't have when it's same with adults. It's like I often when I'm training people saying, see the adults around you as kids and you'll change your energy and your perspective of them. It's like, you'll see that's what's being triggered.
With the trauma, with the workshops, I would talk a lot about what's going on in your brain in these moments of stress and fear. And that made a big difference to me, as to understand what all that stress hormones doing to my brain, how it's making me act in that younger state. It's putting me back into my worst moments, and all of us are the same. So I was actually not being an adult in those moments with my kids, and my kids weren't 10, they were 18 months old. And you used to say, why are you whining like a baby? Why are you look at her having a tantrum like a 2-year-old? But you've just said it, that's what they are in that moment. They are a 2-year-old. To tend to them like they were a 2-year-old. Like you say, you would treat them very differently, wouldn't you, if it was actually a 2-year-old lying on the floor crying? Yeah. You would rock them and you would soothe them. You wouldn't lecture them and send them to their room like a 10-15-year-old.
Yeah, that's true.
So attend to them emotional age, that's where that connection comes back in.
Is there a real practical, real life example of you using these skills you could share with us?
A gazillion.
I'm sure you've got loads
of them.
Just one for the listeners. So that
I talk a lot about, because I talk a lot about letting kids express how they feel and express their emotions, and people are really like, no, I don't think so. So I'll use one of those.
Yeah.
So when we started putting this into practice, my wee guy, often would come home really stressed out and with so much stress all day at school, it was just too much. And he would be very argumentative. That's the fight and the flight, when his brain was switched off and he was just wanting an argument all the time. And I used to get sucked into that argument every time. I would get into it with him and we'd both end up being really stressed. So I started to be able to do my breathing before I went. And then as we were driving home, and he kept saying things like, we don't normally drive this way. We always drove the same way. And I'm like, oh, really? Is it not? Instead of arguing with him, I would just agree. Right, okay. And he would say, why are you not arguing with me? And you could see he knew something was different. If we got home, he was still agitated, and he would start to say horrible things, and he'd change it to call me names or say, I don't love you, I hate you, you're bad to me, all that stuff. And instead of me chasing him up the stairs and shouting at him and saying, oh, you shouldn't speak to me like that, and how dare you slam that door at me, and adding more stress like I normally would, I did my breathing, kept calm, and I said, okay, you're just expressing your emotions, that's fine. And he ran off to his room yelling and screaming at me, and I said, I'll be here when you're ready, I'll be waiting for you when you need to talk to me. And I just stayed calm. And my daughter with autism came out. And now normally she knows how this would go. So she was getting escalated because she was waiting on the kick-off and the yelling and the screaming. But she seen me and seen that I was calm. So that told her, it's okay, everything's fine, you're safe. So she was like, oh, okay. I said loud enough for him to hear. It's okay, he's just really stressed out right now. He's just expressing how he feels, and then he'll be fine. And it just wasn't a problem. So he did a few minutes. Now this would have went on for hours before, and we would all be upset. The minutes he came down, I was waiting for him, calm, and he said, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to say those things to you, I don't mean them. And I said, I know you don't mean them, I know it's just the stress in your brain. And we were connected, and we hugged and we rocked, and we sat together and we regulated together, and we talked to me about how stress makes you crazy, it makes you not think, it makes you not mean it. She's bringing up all your own stuff, because this boy had extreme trauma.
Yeah.
And that is when we talked about, when we were both calm and connected, we talked about, right, what could we do differently next time? How can we manage this next time? Because he has to learn how to deal with that. You can't just let him go about calling me names.
Yeah.
So that's where we talk about, right, next time you come home feeling like that, this is what we'll do. And we practice it 3 times. It's a great fun. Because I said, right, come on, slam the door, come in, you're really annoyed, you're storming up the stairs, what are you going to say? Because I said, look, when you say those things to me, it makes me sad. I don't like to hear you say that. And you feel bad for saying it. So what could we do instead? So we learned that he came in, he would be mad, it's okay, he could be mad, that's fine. It's just how he feels. But he would shout, I'm mad, I'm stressed, I'm had a bad day, and storm on up, and he was allowed to bash his door, and he was allowed to throw his toy. There were certain things he was allowed to do that were okay. And he'd come back down and he'd feel better. And there was no disconnect. The relationship wasn't broken. There was that rupture hadn't happened. And also, it got that he didn't need it. The more he did it and he got it out, he just didn't have the need to do it anymore. And he could actually start to talk about what was wrong with him. He started to learn, and it was like building that new pathway every time he did it. And at first he still did it wrong. And again, we do the same thing. We reconnect, we talk about let's practice it, and it took a wee while of repetition until he just could do it. And he learned how to write, how he couldn't always verbalise what his experience had been, all the stuff that was coming up from him. And he got that he could draw it, and he could write it, and he'd draw it in these pictures, and then he could talk me through what he'd drawn. And I found out things I didn't even know had happened to him, because he then was able, because I was no longer the threat coming in with control and punishments. And he was able to be in relationship with me and be connected and feel safe and tell me what his experience had been. So different from hours and hours of yelling and screaming, getting nowhere, punishments. And of course, taking his iPad off him for a week just makes the whole thing last longer, makes him feel disconnected more. And I just stopped. It just took away the need for any kind of consequences, because I could see that he got to learn that he thought he was a bad boy, that something was wrong with him, that he was behaving this way. And he started to learn that it was the stress in his brain and that it wasn't his fault. And it's actually a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. I think I talk a lot about is that I've had lots of different kids in my care with different kinds of trauma, but the behaviours are all the same. They're all the same thing. So the brain must do something, like a default setting, that when you experience this as a child, this is what happens to you, this is how you behave. So it's not just one child that behaves that way. They all kind of behave the same. They all have the same patterns of behaviour. So it must be normal for a child with trauma to behave that way.
I wonder sometimes if there's maybe that's what they've witnessed as well, so that's what they model. But my foster son doesn't. In fact, he's kind of the opposite. He goes within, so he internalizes and. So it was the first time, you know, teaching him emotional language, and the first time he turned around and actually said out loud, I'm just feeling really annoyed, Lorraine, I'm feeling really angry. Wonderful. I hugged him. I was like, oh, I'm so proud of you. And he was like, what? You put into words how you feel. That's amazing. That's so important.
That's expressing it, isn't it? Yeah, that's what I talk all about.
It can sometimes be that too.
And then I talked to you about the two states you can go into in dysregulation. So although most kids will go into hyperarousal, which is that fight, flight, argument, recompense, but a lot of kids can go into the hypoarousal, which is shut down.
Yes.
Don't want to talk about it, don't want to see it. It's like a wee turtle in a shell. And it's hard to have a child like that. It's really hard to get them back out of that. But just your relationship and connection is what it's all about, I think.
I was going to ask as well that somebody had asked a question about kids who experience trauma through birth. Do you have anything to offer?
Yes. Firstly, I'd like to say how wonderful it is that a parent can even recognise that that's the issue, because often we don't connect the two things and we don't realise that bad birth can affect us and through our life.
A baby,
and it will affect us all through our lives. It's not something that's going to go away. But if it can be dealt with in a therapeutic way with relationship and connection, then it can obviously be, they can learn how to manage it. But yeah, I mean, I talk a lot about all the different trauma. I mean, there's also all the trauma that kids can experience, but there's so many things like generational trauma, birth trauma, in vitro experience. All of that can affect us and learned behaviours, all that stuff. But if your first experience in life is pure terror and fear, and also maybe being in an incubator for months on end in a hospital, or being hospitalised as a young child, being alone in a hospital, that all stays with you. That the body the mind won't remember what happened, but the body remembers the feeling of it. So anything can trigger that memory in the brain. So the moment of stress and fear, that's coming up, and that child is back in that regressed state. I mean, how regressed is that to basically be a newborn baby, a scared newborn baby every time you're scared, stressed? So if a parent, and there's nobody better placed to help that child than its parent, if it's in connection and relationship. We can go to as many psychotherapists and, you know, doctors' offices, but they don't see your child in that state of dysregulation. They only see the child when they're calm and they're maybe a wee bit stressed, but they're not melting down. And it's when your child's in absolute dysregulation is when you have the opportunity to come in and hold them in that and be calm and safe and connected. And that's where the healing will happen for that. You know, they'll learn that it's okay, it's safe. Over and over again. That needs to happen over and over again for the parent to be calm and with them and say, it's okay, I'm here. Maybe start talking about why that, you know, if a child can start to understand that that's coming back for me. I mean, obviously it depends on the age of the child. A 3-year-old won't understand that they're remembering their traumatic birth. But just talk about stress and talking about how you're feeling. And again, I mean, like what you do, breathing techniques. If you can teach your children to start to do breathing techniques when they're stressed out, recognizing their stress and breathing, that's a life skill. You know, I wish I'd known that years ago. You know,
me too.
And learning to trigger, because they say it's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. So if your kids can start doing that now, if they start seeing you do it, because that's how kids learn, is watching what we do. So if you can say, I'm just really stressed right now, I'm going to be doing my breathing. They're going to just look at you like you're nuts, but they're going to learn that's what you do when you're stressed. Instead of what we do is panic and run about and get more stressed.
Or shout and scream or whatever, you know.
And I often talk about when I like to go on a cruise, but I'm terrified of the big, deep sea and what's under there. And I try not to think about it, but if the boat starts to get rocky, I look at the staff. And if the staff are calm, then I'm like, oh, everyone's fine. But if they're running about panicking, I know I should be scared. And it's the same for our kids. They see us be calm, they feel safe. If we're in a panic and we're stressed and we're upset, then that tells them you should be stressed.
Yes, that's true.
And we set the tone.
Suzanne, it feels like we could talk or blather for ages, so it's really been lovely chatting to you.
Once I start, I'm like...
No, not at all.
It's been
fascinating, and I'm going to share this on my blog. so people can find, I can see you've got your banner up there, you do workshops one-to-ones. I take it they're online at the moment with.
Yes, they are. I'm a charity and I've got funding at the moment. I can do workshops for free up till the end of October, but it's better than nothing. So
how long do your workshops last? How do they?
Okay, they're usually about 3 hours. I always run over because I talk too much, but I can do them into two halves, maybe an hour and a half each day or whatever. I can work around anyone's needs.
What you're doing is amazing. I can feel your passion for it, and I wish you every success with what you do and how you help people. And just keep up the great work. I think sharing good practice like this is really important, and educating people. And there's a bit of crossover between your stuff and our stuff, but it's
absolutely.
But in terms of the trauma work, that really, as a foster mum, that really interests me. So I'll certainly be sharing that far and wide with as many people as I know. Thank you for your time.
No problem. And can I just say also, if anyone felt they wanted to give us a donation, there is a bit on the page where you can leave a small donation. Feel free on the Facebook page.
Great.
No, it's lovely.
Yeah, great.